Imagine a contract that promises you everything but legally forbids you from demanding anything. This is the staggering reality of the Nigerian Constitution's Chapter 2. While it outlines your rights to food, health, and dignity, it contains a secret poison that renders these promises worthless. For decades, the ruling class has hidden behind a single legal clause to avoid providing basic services. Tonight, we peel back the layers of a legal document that has systematically betrayed over 200 million citizens. Chapter 2 of the 1999 Constitution is titled The Fundamental Objectives and Directive Principles of State Policy. On paper, it is a beautiful vision of a prosperous nation. It mandates the government to provide free education, affordable housing, and a stable economy for all. However, beneath this polished surface lies a trap set by the military and political elite. They gave the people a vision of hope while simultaneously ensuring that no citizen could ever sue the state for failing them. The year 1999 was supposed to be a new dawn for Nigeria. After years of brutal military rule, the transition to democracy brought a sense of collective euphoria. The people expected a constitution that would protect their interests and punish corruption. But the document they received was drafted in secret, away from the public eye. It preserved the power structures of the past, ensuring that those in the corridors of power would remain untouchable regardless of how much they neglected the poor. Prince Faloye, a prominent voice in Nigerian socio-political discourse, argues that this chapter is the ultimate tool of oppression. He points to Section 6, subsection 6c, as the silver bullet used by politicians. This specific clause states that the judiciary has no power to decide if the government has met the goals of Chapter 2. In legal terms, these rights are non-justiciable. This means you have a right to life, but you do not have a right to the means of living. Consider the tragedy of the Nigerian healthcare system. Chapter 2 explicitly states that the state shall direct its policy toward ensuring adequate medical and health facilities for all persons. Yet, hospitals across the nation lack basic bandages and reliable electricity. When a mother loses her child due to a lack of oxygen in a public ward, she cannot cite the Constitution to demand justice. The law that should protect her has been stripped of its teeth by those who wrote it. Education is another pillar of Chapter 2 that has been systematically dismantled. The state is urged to provide free university education when practicable. However, politicians have ensured it never becomes practicable. Instead, they underfund public institutions while sending their own children to elite schools abroad. By keeping the masses uneducated, the political class maintains a cycle of dependency. A child born in a Nigerian slum is promised a future by the law, but denied a desk by the government. The betrayal extends to the very air Nigerians breathe and the water they drink. Environmental protection is mandated in Chapter 2, yet the Niger Delta remains one of the most polluted places on earth. Oil spills destroy livelihoods while the state looks the other way. Because the environmental clauses are non-justiciable, the communities affected have no legal standing to force the government to clean up their homes. The Constitution acts as a shield for the polluters rather than the victims. Prince Faloye argues that this constitutional loophole has created a system of enforced poverty. It is not that Nigeria lacks the resources to fulfill these objectives, it is that the law allows politicians to divert those resources without consequence. Nigeria is a land of immense wealth, yet it houses the highest number of people living in extreme poverty. This is not an accident of history, it is a calculated result of a legal framework designed to fail the many. The historical roots of this betrayal go back to the colonial era, but the 1999 version perfected it. During the military regimes of the 80s and 90s, the generals wanted to appear benevolent without actually being accountable. They adopted the directive principles from other nations but removed the enforcement mechanisms. They built a cage for the people and called it a constitution. Now, decades into civilian rule, the current political class refuses to amend the very document that protects them. How do other countries handle this? In nations like India, the courts have used similar directive principles to expand human rights. Indian judges have ruled that the right to life includes the right to a clean environment and basic education. But in Nigeria, the judiciary has largely remained passive. The courts often cite their own lack of jurisdiction, folding their hands while the executive branch ignores its duties. This judicial silence is the final nail in the coffin of Chapter 2. The economic betrayal is perhaps the most visible. Chapter 2 demands that the economic system is not operated in a manner that permits the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few. Yet, Nigeria has one of the highest levels of income inequality in the world. A small circle of politically connected individuals controls the vast majority of the nation's assets. While they live in fortified mansions, the average worker struggles to afford a single meal a day. Politicians often campaign on the very promises found in Chapter 2. They promise roads, electricity, and jobs during every election cycle. They use the language of the Constitution to win votes, knowing full well they have no legal obligation to deliver. Once the elections are over, the promises are shelved. They are aware that the voters cannot take them to court for failing to build a hospital. This cycle of deception is fueled by the non-justiciability of the Constitution. Security is a fundamental right mentioned in Section 14. It states that the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. However, as banditry and kidnapping ravage the countryside, the state's failure is evident. Families are left to pay ransoms with their life savings while the government claims it is doing its best. Because this duty is buried in Chapter 2, the state faces no legal penalty for its inability to protect its own borders. Faloye argues that the 1999 Constitution is essentially an anti-people document. It was never voted on by the public, it was foisted upon them by a departing military government. This lack of legitimacy is the root of the current crisis. Every time a citizen asks for their rights, they are met with the cold reality of Section 6. The Constitution serves as a gatekeeper that prevents the wealth of the nation from reaching the people who actually own it. The infrastructure of the nation is a physical manifestation of this betrayal. Broken bridges, collapsed power grids, and dry taps are the norm. Under Chapter 2, the state is supposed to harness the resources of the nation to promote the common good. Instead, billions are budgeted for projects that are never completed. The money disappears into private bank accounts, protected by a legal system that does not recognize the theft of public services as a violation of constitutional rights. Youth disillusionment is at an all-time high. A generation of Nigerians is growing up knowing that the laws of their land are stacked against them. They see the Directive principles as a cruel joke. Many are forced to flee the country in search of the dignity that their own constitution promises but denies. This brain drain is the direct result of a government that is not legally required to care for its brightest minds, leading to a massive loss of potential. What happens when a nation's foundation is built on a lie? Trust in government evaporates. When the people realize that the Constitution is a shield for the elite, they stop believing in the democratic process. This leads to social unrest, protests, and a breakdown of the social contract. The betrayal in Chapter 2 is not just a legal issue, it is a ticking time bomb that threatens the very stability of the Nigerian Federation and the West African region. The cost of living crisis is the latest chapter in this saga. As inflation skyrockets and the currency devalues, the promise of a stable economy in Chapter 2 feels like a distant memory. The government's response has been to ask the people to endure more hardship while the salaries of lawmakers remain among the highest in the world. This disparity is a blatant violation of the spirit of the Constitution, yet there is no legal avenue for the people to demand a change. Critics of the current system call for a total overhaul of the 1999 Constitution. They argue that Chapter 2 must be made justiciable. If a citizen can sue the government for a breach of contract, why can't they sue the state for failing to provide the basic necessities of life? Making these rights enforceable would transform Nigeria overnight. It would force accountability and ensure that the nation's wealth is used for the benefit of all, rather than a select few. The judiciary holds the key to this change. Some legal scholars believe that even without an amendment, brave judges could begin to interpret the law differently. They could rule that the right to life, which is enforceable, is meaningless without the rights found in Chapter 2. However, this requires a level of judicial independence that is currently lacking. Most judges are appointed by the very politicians they would have to hold accountable, creating a conflict of interest that stifles justice. Faloye's message is a wake-up call. He asserts that Nigerians must understand their constitution to change it. Most people do not know that their poverty is, in many ways, written into the law. By educating the public about the trap of non-justiciability, activists hope to build a movement that cannot be ignored. The goal is to move from a document that merely suggests progress to one that demands it, ensuring that every Nigerian has a stake in the nation. The struggle for constitutional reform is the defining battle of modern Nigeria. It is a fight between those who want to maintain the status quo and those who dream of a functional society. The betrayal in Chapter 2 is the wall that stands between the people and their potential. Breaking down this wall will require courage, persistence, and a collective refusal to accept empty promises. The future of the African giant depends on whether its laws serve the many or the few. As we look to the future, the question remains, will the next generation of leaders have the integrity to fix what is broken? Or will they, too, find the comfort of the non-justiciable clause too tempting to give up? The betrayal of the Nigerian people is not just a historical event, it is an ongoing crime. Every day that Chapter 2 remains unenforceable is another day that the promise of a great nation is deferred. The time for excuses has long passed. The story of Nigeria's Chapter 2 is a reminder that laws are only as good as their enforcement. A constitution should be a living shield for the people, not a hiding place for politicians. Until the fundamental objectives of the state become rights that every Nigerian can fight for in court, the betrayal will continue. We must demand a constitution that works for us, not against us. The journey to a true democracy begins with reclaiming the rights that were stolen in plain sight.